Tell me you don't understand gestational surrogacy without telling me that you don't understand gestational surrogacy. I'm Dr. Jessica Reinick. I'm a double board certified OBGYN and reproductive endocrinology and infertility specialist, and I'm going to talk about what the Pope talked about yesterday. He called for a universal prohibition of the use of surrogacy as a threat to human dignity. So I wanted to spend some time talking about the use of a gestational carrier, what the indications are, and also how the gestational carrier is protected in this process. So you can see here the indications for the use of a gestational carrier from the 2022 ASRM guidelines on practices that want to use a gestational carrier. So the indications are absence of a uterus, a significant uterine anomaly, absolute psychological or medical contraindication to pregnancy, or serious psychological or medical condition that could be exacerbated by pregnancy, and a biologic inability to conceive or bear a child, such as a single male or a homosexual male couple. What a gestational carrier is a person who carries a pregnancy that results from the transfer of an embryo created by one or more genetic parents or gamete donors or the intended parents. What a gestational carrier is not is a surrogate mother, which was one of the biggest problems that I had personally with the Pope's speech. So these are the FDA requirements and the ASRM recommendations for the intended parents. So they need to go under a physical examination and a medical questionnaire, and then there's extensive laboratory testing of infectious disease, both for those providing the sperm and the egg, and that is all required by the FDA for an embryo to be created and eligible for transfer to a gestational carrier. In addition to that, ASRM recommends extensive legal consultation, psychological evaluation, and the medical and genetic screening that is recommended as a standard as well. This is to protect the intended parents and the gestational carriers. So how are the gestational carriers selected? This is kind of a basic recommendation where carriers should be between the ages of 21 to 45 with at least one prior healthy term pregnancy and no more than 5 prior deliveries, with not more than 3 of them being cesarean sections. And then also, and importantly, the carrier must have an adequate support system to help them cope with this process. As with the intended parents, there is extensive screening and counseling for gestational carriers, including infectious disease, medical history, a physical exam with lab and preconception testing, a uterine cavity evaluation, and it's really important that there is extensive psychosocial evaluation and counseling, as well as legal counseling for gestational carriers. This is what helps prevent the exploitation that the Pope is very concerned about in his speech. And when I say extensive psychosocial screening, I am talking about extensive psychosocial screening, including assessment for any signs of coercion. And then this is the last thing that I wanted to share because this video is getting super long, but this is from the 2023 ASRM ethics guidelines surrounding the use of a gestational carrier. And this is another long document that shares the ethical points that are really important in considering when using a gestational carrier. You can see here the key points here. What I think is really important is that ultimately the gestational carrier is the sole source of consent regarding their medical care. They should be fully informed of the risks of this whole process, and that includes physical, psychological, and social. They are getting extensive evaluation. They are getting extensive legal counseling, and it is ethically justifiable for a gestational carrier to be compensated for this arrangement. And another really important point, as I stated before, is that the intended parents are the legal parents. This is not a gestational carrier mother, a surrogate mother, as is suggested by the Pope. They are carrying the pregnancy for the intended parents. So while I'm not necessarily surprised by the statement by the Pope or the Church about the use of gestational carriers or surrogates, I am a little bit surprised by what it seems to be like a lack of education or understanding necessarily about what the process is. I wish that that had happened before some of these statements were made, but hopefully this video, despite being long, was helpful in kind of explaining the GC process a little bit more.